Shining the Light with IUMC welcomes you to another Meditate at 8.
With what shall I come before the Lord? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn, the fruit of my body, for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. Micah 6, verses 6 to 8. What does God require of us? We often set high expectations for ourselves and just as often fail in attaining them. We set ourselves up for failure. If I do that to myself, it's easy for me to project that same kind of thinking onto God. There's a small voice in my head that tells me that God expects me to be perfect, perfectly loving, perfectly patient, perfectly forgiving, perfectly everything. And of course, I fail. And I blame myself, and I feel guilty and angry at myself, and it impacts my relationship with God. What does God require of us? Micah offers the answer. God doesn't hold us to some arbitrary standard of how much we give or how much we sacrifice or how often we serve or how perfect or imperfect we are. We get to a point where we want to do those things, where we want to do better, but not because of any obligation imposed by God. God wants us to focus on doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with him. What God wants is a change of heart that leads to a change in attitude and action. God wants to see a transformation in our lives, and transformation is a process that takes time. You see, God wants us to love being kind to others. That doesn't mean we'll always be kind, but if we love being kind and we understand that being kind is a process, and because we know how kind God has been to us, we'll get better at being kind every day. Walking humbly with God means we set aside our pride and our desires and walk along the path laid out for us by God. Like any hike on a path, we may need to sit down and rest for a while, or we may see something interesting off to the side and wander off the path for a short time. But the path is still there, waiting for us to get back where we need to be and resume our journey. What message do you see in these verses for you? Are you setting impossible standards for yourself and then believing you're a failure? If so, these verses are a reminder that this is not what God wants. God wants to work on a change in you beginning in your heart. What do you think?